Just 18 months ago, the United States went into its first recession since 2008. The recession of 2020 was actually the shortest in American history. Economic activity peaked in February 2020, bottomed out just 2 months later, and then began to recover. But that rebound came at a cost, to the tune of $5 trillion in federal stimulus bills. In March 2020, President Trump signed the $2.2 trillion CARES Act.
This will deliver urgently needed relief to our nation's families, workers, and businesses. And that's what this is all about.
In December 2020, he signed another $900 billion aid package. Then, in March 2021, President Biden approved the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. All in all, the federal government responded more aggressively to the 2020 recession than any prior downturn, dwarfing the $831 billion stimulus greenlighted by President Obama after the 2008 financial crisis. Despite all that spending, 3 economic crises are currently threatening the recovery, meaning that we may already be heading straight for another crash. The first crisis is record high inflation. In addition to all those federal handouts, the Federal Reserve manipulates the money supply during recessions to stimulate the economy. The central bank buys up assets like government bonds from the marketplace, so that there are more liquid assets like dollars available for businesses and consumers to quickly and easily spend. Once COVID hit the United States, the Fed announced that it would purchase $120 billion in assets per month, a policy that has not yet been tapered. The Fed is also targeting a 0% federal funds rate, the rate that commercial banks use to loan money to one another overnight. That's another way for the Fed to ramp up the money supply and stimulate economic activity. As libertarian economist Milton Friedman was fond of saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Someone has to shell out for all of that spending.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. You pay for it.
And as it turns out, that person is you, the American taxpayer, through inflation. In essence, inflation is the erosion of purchasing power over time. If the government prints more dollars, each dollar already in existence becomes less scarce and therefore decreases in value. One of the Fed's mandates is ensuring that inflation stays low and stable, usually a 2% annual rate. But since January 2021, the inflation rate has nearly quadrupled, from 1.4 to 5.4%. American consumers are feeling the pinch of those higher price levels as they make day-to-day economic decisions. Food companies like Tyson and Nestle have hiked prices, leading to higher grocery bills. MSNBC reported that this year's Thanksgiving will likely be the most expensive ever. As oil and gas prices rise, the Department of Energy thinks Americans may be facing winter heating expenses 30 to 50% higher than usual. Many seniors are worried about the impact of inflation on retirement savings, and the Fed's monetary policy is also behind skyrocketing home prices, which decreases Americans' access to affordable housing. This wouldn't be as much of a problem if Americans were earning more to cover the higher expenses. But since wages are increasing at a slower pace than inflation, Americans are effectively taking home less new wealth with each paycheck. It turns out that the inflation problem is connected to the second crisis, a labor shortage hitting nearly every corner of the economy. As of August, America had 10.4 million job openings and 8.4 million unemployed people, meaning that there aren't enough workers to fill all those openings. At the same time, labor force participation rates, the percentage of American adults who are in the job market, never recovered from the 2020 recession. Now, workers are free to be choosy with the positions they accept. Between April and August 2021, employees left their jobs nearly 20 million times, more than 60% higher than the resignations seen during the same period in 2020. Even though the economy created 2 million net jobs between April and August, overall employment is still 3% lower than its pre-COVID levels. It's probable that the $300 weekly federal unemployment checks introduced by the COVID stimulus bills have worsened the problem. A poll taken this summer shows that 1 in 8 Americans collecting the handouts have refused job offers while unemployed because they receive enough money from unemployment insurance without having to work. Though that benefit has ended, Uncle Sam is still shelling out money through the child tax credit and other new programs. In a labor market with low supply of workers and high demand for work, worsened by the government subsidizing people choosing to stay home, employers have no choice but to ramp up pay. Since suppliers need to find extra cash to pay for truckers, packagers, warehouse workers, and clerks, those high costs get passed onto you, the consumer. And that's also why the labor shortage is helping to cause the third crisis, persistent supply chain issues.
This video is brought to you by Kamikoto. Kamikoto makes great Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques from Japan. They only use steel sourced from mills in Japan, and each blade is crafted using techniques that have been honed and perfected by generations of bladesmiths. Every knife comes in a beautiful, heavy-duty ashwood box. Make sure that the knife is stored safely, and it also makes this a wonderful gift. Can't you see just getting that, opening it up and saying, this person who just gave this to me clearly loves me. Each knife is individually inspected, and Kamikoto is so confident about their knives that each knife comes with a lifetime guarantee. Kamikoto is currently having a massive holiday sale, and on top of that sale, you can get an additional $50 off any purchase you make with discount code DailyWire. I've used these knives. They are ridiculously sharp. I tried to take this box home with me because after I used them, I wanted them. They told me I wasn't allowed, but I'm gonna go buy my own set. You should do the exact same thing. Just use the code DailyWire again for that discount. So click the link below or go to kamikoto.com/dailywire and use promo code DailyWire to save an extra $50 today.
At California's major seaports, which process 40% of all shipping containers entering the United States from Asian manufacturing hubs like China, Malaysia, and Vietnam, there are roughly 100 ships waiting around to enter and unload. Because in sectors like trucking, which are crucial for getting products in front of consumers, there's a driver shortage so severe that many high schools are now launching truck driving classes for their students. American companies desperately need these goods to reach shelves, especially heading into the holiday season, when firms depend on retail sales for huge portions of their yearly profits. But there seems to be no end in sight. When the Wall Street Journal surveyed leading economists, 45% estimated that it will take until the second half of 2022 for tight supply chains to be dealt with. In fact, half of respondents pointed to supply chain issues as the biggest threat to economic growth in the next year and a half. High inflation, labor shortages, supply chain bottlenecks. We now see that all of these problems are interrelated and worsened by government policy. American taxpayers and consumers pay the price, which is making them very skittish. The economists David Blanchflower and Alex Bryson argue that the wisdom of crowds is often more useful than the knowledge of so-called experts, especially when predicting downturns. This was especially true for the 2008 recession. A report from The Economists showed that rapid drops in consumer optimism successfully predicted recessions for the past 4 decades. Looking at double-digit drops in sentiment over the last 6 months, the two economists think the United States is now entering a recession. Since the national debt is nearly $30 trillion and Congress is at war over the debt ceiling, it may be a lot harder this time for lawmakers to shell out $5 trillion of stimulus. And since the Fed's monetary policy is already maxed out, it may be harder to carry out aggressive monetary policy. After all, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I'm Ian Howarth with the Daily Wire. Thanks for watching.